I'm Claudia, 35 years old, and until last month, I thought I had the perfect marriage. My husband James and I shared a beautiful apartment in Boston and a charming country house in New Hampshire. As an interior designer, I created perfect spaces for everyone, including us. But when I found texts between him and his coworker Stephanie, I knew something was wrong. What they didn't know was that I had a special surprise waiting in our country house shower. Let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to see how I caught them blue-handed. James and I met 14 years ago at a charity gala in downtown Boston. I was 21 then, fresh out of design school and working as an assistant at a small interior design firm. He was 26, a promising young attorney at Sullivan & Morris, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. I remember exactly what he was wearing that night, a perfectly tailored navy suit that complemented his dark hair and blue eyes. "You look lost," he said, approaching me with 2 champagne glasses in hand. I wasn't lost at all, just admiring the venue's architecture, but I accepted the drink anyway. "Not lost," I replied. "Just appreciating the crown molding. It's original to the building." That made him laugh. "I've been coming to events here for years and never once noticed the molding." We spent the entire evening talking about architecture design and our ambitions. By the time the gala ended, we had already planned our first date. Our romance moved quickly. Within a year, we were engaged, and 6 months later, we had a beautiful wedding at the Boston Public Library. Everyone said we were the perfect couple, the ambitious attorney and the creative designer. We complemented each other in every way. We purchased our first home together, a spacious apartment in Back Bay with incredible architectural details. I spent months renovating it carefully, preserving the historic elements while adding modern comforts. James would come home from long days at the firm to find me covered in paint or measuring for custom cabinets. He always said my dedication to my craft was what made him fall in love with me. As the years passed, both our careers flourished. I opened my own design studio, Claudia Interiors, which quickly gained a reputation for thoughtful, personalized spaces. James made partner at his firm by 32, the youngest in the company's history. We worked hard, sometimes spending days barely seeing each other as we pursued our professional goals. But we always made time for weekend getaways and special occasions. 3 years ago, after 9 years of marriage, we decided to purchase a country home, a beautiful colonial-style house on 5 acres in New Hampshire, about 2 hours from Boston. It needed significant renovation, but I saw its potential immediately. "This place could be magical," I told James as we walked through the creaky rooms on our first viewing. "I can open up this wall to create flow between the kitchen and living area, and these original wood floors just need to be refinished to bring out their character." James trusted my vision completely. "If you love it, I love it. Do whatever you want with the place." I spent the next year pouring my heart into that house, driving up every chance I got to oversee the renovation. I designed custom cabinetry for the kitchen, restored the original fireplaces, and created a master bathroom with a spectacular walk-in shower featuring floor-to-ceiling glass and multiple shower heads. I even learned some basic plumbing from YouTube videos and consulting with contractors, determined to understand every aspect of the house's systems. The country house became my passion project, my creative outlet away from client demands. James would tease me about my obsession with the place, but he appreciated the results. When the renovation was complete, we began spending nearly every weekend there, hosting friends for dinner parties and enjoying quiet mornings on the wraparound porch. Everything seemed perfect, but looking back now, I realized the cracks in our marriage had already begun to form. James started working later and later, canceling our weekend plans at the last minute for urgent cases. I told myself this was normal for a partner at a major law firm. I made excuses for him when he missed my birthday dinner because of a client emergency. I ignored the way he guarded his phone, always keeping it face down and taking calls in another room. About a year ago, James's firm hired several new associates, including Stephanie Warner. I met her at the company's holiday party last December. Tall, blonde, and 10 years younger than me, she had a way of commanding attention in any room. I noticed how she laughed at all of James's jokes, touched his arm when they spoke, and somehow always ended up near him throughout the evening. Stephanie is incredibly bright, James told me on the drive home. Franklin thinks she might be partner material in a few years. Something about the way he said her name made my stomach tighten, but I pushed the feeling aside. I wasn't going to be that wife, the one who gets jealous over her husband's colleagues. I trusted James. We had built a life together. 12 years of marriage didn't disappear because a pretty new associate joined his firm. That was my first mistake. I should have trusted my instincts. Over the next 6 months, James's behavior became increasingly suspicious. He started coming home even later, often after I had already gone to bed. When I asked about his day, his answers were vague and dismissive. Just the usual, nothing interesting. He bought new clothes more stylish and youthful than his typical conservative suits. He joined a new gym and suddenly became concerned about his diet. The most telling change was his phone habits. James, who once would absent-mindedly leave his phone on the kitchen counter or coffee table, now kept it with him constantly. He would step out of the room to take calls, and his screen would immediately go dark when I walked behind him. One weekend in April, we drove up to our country house. It was the first time in weeks we'd managed to get away together, and I was hopeful the change of scenery would help us reconnect. Instead, James spent most of the time on his phone smiling at texts and stepping outside to take calls. "Work stuff," he explained when I asked. "Big case coming up." That night, I woke around 2 a.m. to find his side of the bed empty. I found him in the kitchen typing on his phone. He quickly put it down when he saw me. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Just checking emails." Who checks emails at 2 a.m. with that kind of smile on their face? I wanted to grab his phone and see for myself, but something held me back. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find. Maybe I still wanted to believe in us. Back in Boston, James began mentioning Stephanie regularly in his work stories. They were staffed on the same cases. They had lunch meetings with clients. She had innovative approaches to legal strategy that impressed the senior partners. Then came our anniversary in May. 12 years of marriage. I made reservations at Sorellina, where we'd had our first anniversary dinner. I bought a new dress, had my hair done, and left work early to get ready. An hour before we were supposed to leave, James called. "I'm so sorry, Claudia. Something's come up with the Henderson case. Emergency filing needed tonight. I don't think I'll make dinner." I sat on our bed in my new dress, fighting back tears. "It's our anniversary, James." I know. I'll make it up to you. We'll go somewhere special this weekend." But we didn't. Another work emergency came up. I couldn't sleep that night, or many nights after. I found myself checking his suit pockets while he showered, looking for receipts or any evidence of where he was really spending his time. I scrolled through our credit card statements, looking for unexplained charges. I became someone I didn't recognize, a suspicious, anxious woman searching for proof of her husband's betrayal. I confided in my best friend Megan over coffee one morning. "Do you think I'm being paranoid?" I asked after listing all the changes I'd noticed. Megan sipped her latte thoughtfully. "It does sound like something's going on, but it could be work stress. Partners at law firms work crazy hours, right? Maybe talk to him before jumping to conclusions." I tried. I planned a special dinner at home, bought James's favorite wine, and attempted to have an honest conversation about the distance I felt growing between us. "I miss you," I said simply. "We barely see each other anymore." James reached across the table and took my hand. "I miss you too. It's just been an intense time at work. Once this current case wraps up, things will calm down." I wanted to believe him. We made love that night for the first time in weeks, but something felt different. James was physically present, but emotionally elsewhere. When he fell asleep, I lay awake wondering who he was thinking about. 2 weeks later, I saw them together. James had told me he was working late, but I decided to surprise him with dinner from his favorite restaurant. When I arrived at his office building, the security guard informed me he'd left hours ago. On a hunch, I drove to Giulia, an Italian restaurant we used to frequent. And there, they were sitting at a corner table, James and Stephanie leaning close, her hand resting on his. They weren't kissing or being overtly romantic, but the intimacy was unmistakable. I watched for a few minutes from my car, feeling sick to my stomach, then drove home and pretended to be asleep when James returned around midnight. I could have confronted him then. Perhaps I should have, but something in me wanted irrefutable evidence, something he couldn't explain away as just a work dinner. So I waited and watched my suspicions growing with each passing day. The moment of undeniable truth came in early June. James announced he had to fly to Chicago for a deposition that would keep him away for 5 days. "The timing's actually perfect," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I was planning to visit my mother that weekend anyway." This was true. I did visit my mother in Philadelphia every summer. What was suspicious was how James's business trip perfectly coincided with my annual visit. The night before his departure, I watched him pack. Dress shirts, ties, and suit pants went into his garment bag, the expected attire for a business trip. But when he left to take a shower, I checked his carry-on duffel and found jeans, casual shirts, and swimming trunks. Chicago in early June wasn't exactly beach weather, and depositions didn't typically call for swimwear. After James fell asleep, I carefully took his iPad from his briefcase. He had always used the same password for all his devices our wedding anniversary and never bothered to change it even as he grew more secretive in other ways. His messages were synced across devices, and what I found confirmed my worst fears. The texts between James and Stephanie went back months. They started professionally enough, discussing case details and office politics. But by February, the tone had changed. "Thinking about you," he had written. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." "Same," she responded. "This meeting will be the highlight of my week." The messages grew increasingly explicit over time. They discussed secret lunches, stolen moments in her car, and eventually plans for their upcoming trip. "My wife will be in Philadelphia visiting her mother," James wrote. "We'll have the country house all to ourselves for the whole weekend." "I can't wait to see this place you've been talking about," Stephanie replied. "Especially that amazing shower you described. We'll have to test it out thoroughly." I felt sick reading their exchange. The country house I had poured my heart into, the shower I had carefully designed. Every inch of it would be the setting for their affair. I rushed to the bathroom and threw up, my whole body shaking with rage and heartbreak. I must have made some noise because James stirred. I quickly closed the messages, returned the iPad to his briefcase, and slipped back into bed, turning away from him. I lay awake all night cycling through emotions, shock, betrayal, grief. And finally, as the sun began to rise, a cold, clear anger. I called Megan as soon as James left for work the next morning. "He's taking her to our country house," I said when she answered, my voice breaking, "while I'm supposed to be at my mother's." "Oh, Claudia, I'm so sorry." I could hear the shock in her voice. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to my mother's." Megan came over immediately. She sat with me at my kitchen table as I showed her the messages I'd photographed with my phone. "You could confront him now," she suggested, "before he even goes." I considered it. I could throw his infidelity in his face, watch him scramble for explanations, kick him out of our home. But something stopped me. After 12 years together, after all the work I'd put into our marriage and our homes, I deserved more than a quick confrontation and a messy, emotional scene. "No," I said finally. "I want him to know exactly what he's losing, and I want it to be memorable." When James came home that evening, I greeted him with a smile and asked about his day. I helped him finish packing, double-checking he had everything he needed for his business trip. I drove him to the airport the next morning and kissed him goodbye. "Have a productive trip," I said. "Don't work too hard." "I'll call you every night," he promised. "Give your mom my love." I watched him walk into the terminal carrying the bags packed with clothes for his romantic getaway, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. I already knew exactly what I was going to do. Most people don't know this about me, but I grew up helping my father with construction projects. He was a contractor who specialized in renovations, and from the time I was old enough to hold a wrench, he brought me along on jobs. "Everyone should understand how their home works," he always said. This hands-on experience was part of what inspired me to become an interior designer. I understood not just how spaces looked, but how they functioned. When we renovated the country house, I didn't just choose fixtures and finishes. I worked alongside the plumbing contractor, learning how the new system operated. I knew every pipe, every valve, every connection in that house. And now that knowledge was going to serve a purpose my father never could have anticipated. My initial thought was simple drive to the country house and confront them there, catching them in the act. But that seemed too straightforward, too predictable. James would apologize, Stephanie would be embarrassed, and they'd both move on, perhaps even continuing their affair more discreetly. No, I wanted something more impactful, something they couldn't easily brush aside or forget. I wanted a moment of revelation that would be seared into their memories, just as the image of their text messages was now seared into mine. That's when I remembered Todd, a client whose vacation home I had designed the previous year. Todd worked in special effects for films, creating practical effects for horror movies and thrillers. We had become friendly during the design process, bonding over our shared appreciation for the technical aspects of our respective fields. I called him the afternoon after dropping James at the airport. "Todd, it's Claudia Bennett. I have an unusual request. Would you be willing to meet for coffee today if possible?" 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Todd at a quiet cafe, explaining my situation in clinical terms. "So basically," Todd said after I finished, "you want to create a memorable special effect using your house's plumbing system that won't cause permanent damage, but will definitely make an impact." "Exactly. Something dramatic but ultimately harmless." Todd thought for a moment, then smiled. "I think I have just the thing. Have you ever heard of theatrical dye powder?" He explained that there were special non-toxic dyes used in the film industry that could temporarily color skin and fabric. One particular formula, when mixed with water, would create a vibrant blue stain that would last on skin for about 24 hours before fading completely. "The best part," Todd said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "is that when people try to wash it off with water, it only sets the color more intensely. They'd need a special solvent to remove it immediately, which I'm guessing you wouldn't provide." I felt a smile spread across my face. "That sounds perfect." Todd helped me gather the supplies I needed: the special dye powder, a timed release container that could be attached to the main water line for the shower, and a few other items to ensure everything worked properly. He even offered to accompany me to the country house to set everything up, but I declined. This was something I needed to do myself. That night, I drove the 2 hours to New Hampshire, arriving at our country house around midnight. I knew James and Stephanie wouldn't arrive until the following afternoon, giving me plenty of time. Still, I parked down the road and approached the property cautiously, using the spare key we kept hidden under a false rock in the garden. The house was dark and quiet as I entered. I moved through the rooms, turning on lights as needed, trying not to think about how James and Stephanie would soon be occupying these spaces. In the master bathroom, I stared at the shower I had so carefully designed: the rain shower head, the body jets, the handcrafted tiles. I thought about Stephanie's message. "We'll have to test it out thoroughly." My resolve strengthened. I made my way to the utility room in the basement where the main water heater and filtration system were located. Working methodically, I installed Todd's special container in line with the pipes that fed the master bathroom shower, setting the timer mechanism to activate approximately 24 hours later, around the time I estimated they would take their first shower. The mechanism was ingenious and simple. When the shower was turned on, water would flow through the container, mixing with the dye powder and delivering a steady stream of clear liquid that would quickly turn blue upon contact with skin or fabric. The first minute of water would be normal, lulling them into a false sense of security before the dye kicked in. In addition to the shower trap, I set up a small camera in the living room, positioned to capture their reaction when they inevitably came running downstairs. I was careful to aim it only at common areas. I had no interest in filming anything intimate. I just wanted to see the aftermath the moment they realized what had happened. Before leaving, I stood in our bedroom looking at the king-size bed with its crisp white linens. I had chosen everything in this room: the soft gray paint color, the walnut nightstands, the reading lamps with perfect warm lighting. Soon, my husband and his mistress would be sleeping here in the sanctuary I had created. The thought sent a fresh wave of pain through me, but it was followed by a grim satisfaction. Their romantic getaway wasn't going to go as planned. I left the house exactly as I had found it, with no trace of my visit. As I drove back to Boston in the early morning hours, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: grief for the marriage I was losing, anger at James's betrayal, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For months, I had been a victim, suspecting, but never knowing for sure, always doubting myself. Now I had taken control of the narrative. Back in Boston, I checked into a small hotel near our country house, one with a kitchenette where I could stay comfortably for a few days. I told James I had arrived safely at my mother's house, and he texted back that his deposition prep was going well in Chicago. We were both lying now. All I had to do was wait. From my hotel room, I tracked James's location using the Find My Friends app we had set up years ago for safety. Around 3 in the afternoon on Friday, I watched his little blue dot move from Boston toward New Hampshire. He wasn't alone, of course, though the app couldn't show me that. Stephanie would be in the passenger seat of his Audi, probably resting her hand on his thigh as he drove, just as I used to do. I tried to distract myself with work emails and magazines, but I kept checking my phone, watching their progress. When the dot finally stopped moving at the location of our country house, I felt my heart rate increase. They had arrived. James texted me a few minutes later. "Just checking in. How's your mom doing?" "She's good," I replied. "We're making her famous lasagna tonight. How's Chicago?" "Cold and windy as usual. Miss you." The casual dishonesty was breathtaking. I wondered if it had always been this easy for him to lie to me, or if it was a skill he had developed during his affair with Stephanie. The waiting was excruciating. I knew from experience that the drive from Boston usually left us wanting to freshen up, and the shower in the master bathroom was always tempting with its multiple jets and perfect water pressure. But they might unpack first, or have a drink, or even christen our marital bed before deciding to shower. I had set up remote access to our house's smart home system months ago, allowing me to control certain features from my phone. Now I used that access to monitor the water usage, which would tell me when they turned on the shower. At 6:30, I saw the indicator light up. Someone was using water in the master bathroom. The special effects dye was designed to activate after about a minute of water flow, giving the person time to get completely in the shower before the water changed. I counted down in my head, imagining James or Stephanie stepping under the spray, closing their eyes as the warm water cascaded over them. Then I heard it even from my phone's small speaker. The screams were unmistakable. First, a female voice. "What the hell?" followed immediately by James. "Oh my God, what's happening?" I switched to the camera feed from the living room, just in time to see them both come running down the stairs, Stephanie wrapped in a towel, James in his boxers. Both of them were bright blue from head to toe, their skin and hair a shocking shade of cobalt that looked almost like body paint. Water dripped from them onto the hardwood floors I had so carefully selected, leaving blue puddles in their wake. "What is this?" Stephanie was screaming, examining her blue hands in horror. Is it the water? Am I having an allergic reaction? James was frantically checking his own skin, which was the same vibrant blue. It has to be something in the water, maybe a chemical reaction with the pipes. They rushed to the kitchen sink, turning on the faucet and splashing water on their faces and arms, trying to rinse off the blue. But just as Todd had promised, the additional water only made the dye set more firmly. Their panicked efforts were making it worse. It's not coming off. Stephanie's voice had risen to a hysterical pitch. James, what the hell is going on? James was on his phone now, frantically searching for emergency plumbers in the area. I don't understand. The water system was completely renovated 3 years ago. This shouldn't be happening. Call poison control, Stephanie demanded. This could be toxic. It's not toxic, James said, still scrolling through his phone. If it were, we'd be feeling sick, not just blue. This has to be some kind of dye or chemical in the water supply. They continued to panic as James called an emergency plumber who said he could be there in an hour. Meanwhile, Stephanie tried using dish soap, then olive oil, then vinegar from the pantry, anything she could find to try to remove the blue stain. Nothing worked. As I watched them, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of me was darkly satisfied seeing their romantic tryst devolve into chaos. Another part felt a deep sadness watching the man I had loved for 12 years, reduced to this frantic, dishonest person. The plumber arrived and quickly identified the issue, discovering the device I had installed on the shower pipe. Someone did this deliberately, he told James, holding up the empty dye container. This didn't happen by accident. I watched James's blue face as realization dawned. Claudia, he said quietly. The plumber looked confused. Who's Claudia? My wife. Stephanie, who had been sitting dejectedly on the couch, wrapped in a towel, jumped up. Your wife did this on purpose. What kind of psycho are you married to? She knows, James said, his voice hollow. She knows about us. How could she know? You said she was visiting her mother. You said this place would be empty. Stephanie was gathering her clothes now, still dripping blue water everywhere. I need to get out of here. I can't believe this is happening. Where are you going to go looking like that? James gestured to her blue skin. We need to figure out how to fix this first. This is your problem, not mine. You told me you and your wife were practically separated. You said she was always too busy with work to come here anymore. Stephanie was shouting now, tears streaming down her blue face. You never said she was the type of person who would do something like this. Their argument escalated with Stephanie blaming James for putting her in this position and James desperately trying to calm her down. Through it all, the plumber awkwardly continued working, clearly uncomfortable being caught in the middle of this domestic drama. I had seen enough. I closed the camera app and sent James a text. How's the shower at our country house? Blue is definitely your color. Then I got in my car and started driving. It was time for the final confrontation. I arrived at our country house just as the plumber was leaving. I parked my car directly behind James's Audi, blocking the driveway. As I stepped out, I saw the plumber give me a knowing look before quickly getting into his van and driving away. Word travels fast in small towns, and I had no doubt he had figured out exactly what was happening. James and Stephanie were in the midst of a heated argument when I walked through the front door without knocking. They both froze at the sight of me. They had managed to put on clothes, a t-shirt and jeans for James, a dress for Stephanie, but their skin and hair remained a vibrant blue. It would have been almost comical if it weren't so heartbreaking. Claudia, James said, his blue face pale beneath the dye. I can explain. I set my purse down calmly on the entry table. Can you please go ahead? Explain why you're in our country house with your colleague when you're supposed to be in Chicago. Explain why you're both blue. I'm very interested in hearing this. Stephanie looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. I should go. she mumbled. No, please stay, I said, my voice steady. You're an important part of this conversation. After all, you've been sleeping with my husband in the home I designed and renovated. That makes you relevant. James stepped forward. Claudia, this isn't what it looks like. I pulled out my phone and began reading from the screenshots I'd taken. Can't wait to feel you against me again. The country house will be perfect, no one will bother us there. We'll have the whole weekend to ourselves. I looked up at him. Is that not what this looks like, James? Because it seems pretty clear to me. The color drained from his face well as much as it could beneath the blue dye. You went through my phone, iPad actually. You really should change your passwords if you're going to have an affair. I turned to Stephanie. Did he tell you we were having problems, that we were practically separated? That's his usual line, I'd guess. Stephanie looked at James, then back at me. He said you were always working, that you two barely saw each other anymore, that the marriage was just a formality at this point. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. I've been working 60-hour weeks to build my business, yes. Meanwhile, he's been working late too, allegedly. Turns out we define working late differently. James tried again. Claudia, I made a terrible mistake. I never meant for this to happen. Stephanie and I, it evolved from a professional relationship. I was going to tell you after I figured things out. After you figured things out? I repeated. You mean after you decided whether she was worth leaving me for? How considerate of you to wait until you were certain before blowing up our 12-year marriage. Stephanie had moved toward the door, but I was still blocking it. James told me you were visiting your mother this weekend, she said quietly. I never would have come here if I thought. If you thought you'd get caught, I finished for her. Or if you thought I'd turn you both blue, I'm curious which is the bigger regret for you right now. James made a move to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Don't. Your hands are still stained with betrayal and dye. This isn't all on me, James said, his tone suddenly defensive. You've been distant too, always at the studio or up here working on this house. We haven't really connected in years. The audacity of his attempt to shift blame ignited something in me. So your solution to feeling disconnected was to sleep with someone else. Not to talk to me, not to suggest counseling, not to make any effort to reconnect. Just jump into bed with the first willing associate at your firm. She wasn't the first, Stephanie said suddenly. The room went silent. I stared at her, then at James, whose blue face had somehow managed to pale even further. What did you say? I asked Stephanie. She looked at James with disgust. Tell her or I will. James remained silent, so Stephanie continued. There was Allison from accounting last year, and before that, a client, Rachel something. I only know because he got drunk one night and bragged about how good he was at keeping secrets from his wife. She turned to me. I'm sorry. I didn't know the extent of it. He made it sound like you two had an understanding. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not just Stephanie, but others before her. Years of betrayal, not just months. I'd been such a fool. Get out, I said to Stephanie, stepping aside from the door. Your Uber might have questions about your appearance, but that's your problem now. She gathered her purse and quickly slipped past me, not looking at either of us again, before closing the door behind her. Now it was just James and me in the home we had created together. The blue man I had once thought would grow old with me. Claudia, please, he began. We can work through this. I'll do counseling, whatever you want. What we have is too important to throw away. What exactly do we have, James? A marriage where you've been cheating on me for years, where you bring other women to the home I poured my heart into, where you lie to me daily about where you are and who you're with. I love you, he said desperately. The others, they didn't mean anything. And that's supposed to make me feel better, That you risked our marriage for meaningless sex. I shook my head. The man I married wouldn't have done this. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm still me. I'm still the man you married. No, that man respected me. That man was honest. That man wouldn't have betrayed me over and over again. I took a deep breath. I want you to leave your keys to this house on the counter and go. The blue will fade in about 24 hours in case you're wondering. Consider it a parting gift, a full day of explaining to everyone you meet why you're blue. James made one last attempt, tears welling in his eyes. Please, Claudia. 12 years. We can't just throw that away. I'll change. I'll prove it to you. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. 12 years was a long time to share with someone. We had built a life together, created homes, made plans for the future. Could we somehow rebuild from this? Then I remembered the texts, the lies, the multiple affairs. The way he had tried to blame me for his infidelity. The person standing before me wasn't the man I had married. He was a stranger who had been living a double life at my expense. The time to change was before you cheated, James. Before you lied. Before you brought another woman into our home. I gestured to the door. Please leave your keys and go. Defeated James placed his house keys on the counter. He gathered his belongings slowly as if hoping I might change my mind with each passing minute. I didn't. What will you tell people? He asked as he reached the door. The truth. That my husband was unfaithful. That we're separating. I looked directly into his eyes. And that he's currently blue with shame. Literally. As James's car disappeared down the driveway, I stood alone in the house that had once represented our future together. Now it would become something else, a symbol of my new beginning. I spent that first night alone in our country house. Not our house anymore, but mine. After James left, I opened all the windows, letting the fresh New Hampshire air sweep through the rooms. I stripped the bed, stuffing the sheets into garbage bags. I couldn't bear the thought of washing them, knowing what might have happened there. I scrubbed the shower until my hands were raw, erasing all traces of the blue dye and, symbolically, of their presence. That night, I slept in the guest room, unable to face the master bedroom. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by waves of grief that felt physical in their intensity. One moment, I was angry, the next, devastated, then strangely empty. 12 years of marriage don't disappear in a day, even when betrayal is involved. The next morning, I called Megan. It worked, I said when she answered. They're both very, very blue. Oh my God. She laughed, then quickly sobered. How are you holding up? I don't know yet, I admitted. I feel everything and nothing at the same time. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, she said. I'm coming up there. You shouldn't be alone. Megan arrived that afternoon with groceries, wine, and a fierce protective energy that I desperately needed. She helped me continue cleaning the house, making it mine again. We moved furniture, rearranged art, and discussed plans for repainting rooms that felt tainted by James's betrayal. I found out it wasn't just Stephanie, I told Megan as we sat on the porch that evening, glasses of wine in hand. There were others before her, years of affairs. Megan reached for my hand. I'm so sorry, Claudia. The worst part is thinking about all the times I doubted myself. All the times I pushed away my suspicions because I didn't want to be that wife, the jealous, insecure one. I took a sip of wine. I kept making excuses for him, blaming myself for working too much or not being attentive enough. That's what manipulative people count on, Megan said. They gaslight you into thinking you're the problem. Over the next few days, Megan stayed with me as I began the practical steps of ending my marriage. I contacted a divorce attorney recommended by another designer friend who had gone through a similar situation. The attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Diana, walked me through the process and assured me that James's infidelity would be considered in any settlement. Document everything, she advised. The text messages, the confrontation, any admissions he made. Massachusetts may be a no-fault divorce state, but judges aren't robots. Infidelity matters, especially multiple affairs. I forwarded her the screenshots I'd taken and gave her a detailed account of everything that had happened at the country house, including Stephanie's revelations about James's previous affairs. When I returned to Boston the following week, James had moved most of his things out of our apartment. He'd left a letter apologizing again, begging for another chance, promising therapy and transparency. I filed it away from my attorney without responding. In the weeks that followed, James made numerous attempts to reconcile. He sent flowers to my studio. He enlisted mutual friends to speak on his behalf. He even showed up at my office one afternoon, causing a scene that embarrassed both of us in front of my employees and clients. "I'm not giving up on us," he declared dramatically. "There is no us anymore," I replied, ushering him out the door. "Please respect that." What James didn't understand was that each desperate attempt only strengthened my resolve. The man I had married would have respected my boundaries, would have given me the space I needed. This performance of remorse seemed more about his ego than genuine regret. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work, taking on new clients and projects that challenged me creatively. I redesigned my company's website and branding, symbolically creating a fresh identity for myself professionally as I worked to do the same personally. I also began the process of reclaiming the country house. I hired contractors to renovate the master bathroom, completely replacing the shower where the blue incident had occurred. I repainted the bedroom in a warm, terracotta color that felt nothing like the cool gray James and I had chosen together. I bought new furniture, new art, new linens, everything fresh and untainted by memories. One unexpected development came from an unlikely source. Todd, the special effects expert who had helped me with the blue dye plan, called to check in a month after the incident. "How did Operation Blue Revenge go?" he asked. I found myself laughing for what felt like the first time in ages as I recounted the scene. They were the perfect shade of Smurf, exactly as you predicted. We ended up meeting for coffee, which turned into dinner, which evolved into a friendship that helped ease my loneliness. Todd wasn't a romantic interest. He was happily married with 2 kids, but he became an important part of my support system, someone who had no history with James and therefore no complicated feelings about our separation. 6 months after the blue shower incident, my divorce from James was finalized. The settlement was fair. I kept the country house and my business, while James kept our Boston apartment and his partnership shares. The division of assets was straightforward, the legal ending of our marriage much simpler than the emotional untangling that continued. James's professional life had taken a hit as well. The affair with Stephanie, who was his subordinate at the firm, violated company policy. When senior partners learned of it, the blue skin had been impossible to hide or explain away. Both James and Stephanie were disciplined. She was transferred to another department, and he was removed from the firm's executive committee, a significant professional demotion. 1 year after discovering James's betrayal, I made the decision to sell our Boston apartment and make the country house my primary residence. I opened a satellite office of my design firm in the nearby town, focusing on projects in New Hampshire and Vermont. The city had too many memories, too many places where I might run into James or mutual friends who still asked awkward questions about our split. The country house, once a symbol of my shattered marriage, had become my sanctuary. I had reclaimed every inch of it, transforming spaces that once held painful memories into areas of comfort and creativity. The home that James had brought his mistress to had become the place where I found myself again. On the anniversary of the blue shower incident, I hosted a dinner party for my closest friends and a few new acquaintances from the area. Megan was there along with Todd and his wife, and several clients who had become friends. As we sat around the large dining table I had designed, eating good food and sharing stories, I realized I was truly happy for the first time in years. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, looking out at the stars. I thought about how much had changed in a year, how the devastation of betrayal had eventually led to a stronger, more authentic life. I had learned painful but valuable lessons. I had learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I had learned that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. Sometimes, it simply means letting go of anger so it doesn't consume you. Most importantly, I had learned that I was stronger than I ever imagined. The blue dye had faded from James's skin within 24 hours, just as Todd had promised. But the experience had permanently marked us both, changing the course of our lives in ways neither of us could have predicted. For James, it was a public humiliation and the loss of the wife who had loved him faithfully for 12 years. For me, it was the beginning of a new chapter, a life rebuilt on my own terms. As I sat there, under the New Hampshire stars, I raised my glass in a silent toast to the woman I had become, a woman who had faced betrayal with creativity and courage, who had transformed pain into power, who had learned that sometimes the end of one story is simply the beginning of a better one. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you find the strength to move forward? What creative ways did you reclaim your power?